He is risen. Oh, you guys are so good. I love it. It gives me goosebumps. Man, welcome to Redemption Church this morning. We are a group of people here at Redemption that are imperfect people, but we have been redeemed by a perfect God. And this morning, as we have this opportunity to reflect on what the resurrection is really all about, man, it just drives home for me just the profound truth that we genuinely are imperfect, but God in His perfection created a perfect way for us to have life with Him. And so as we get started this morning, I want to ask you if you would just pray with me right now. I want to kind of set our hearts a little bit in a place where Jesus can speak into us. And so I think prayer is always the best way to do that. Go ahead and join with me. Jesus, I thank you for this day that we have of reflection, to think about an event that is an historic fact. It is a reality. It is a truth. It's not a mythology. It is not wishful thinking. But it is this event that transpired that shaped then the course of our world, and certainly as individuals, shapes the course of our lives. And so I pray today that we will not just kind of go, okay, let's do our obligatory message and singing and then Easter egg hunt and family meal and move through the day as though this doesn't profoundly impact us and every other day, but rather that we would benchmark today and go, this is why our lives are different, and have the invitation to be different because of what you've done. And so I pray that we will live abundant and intentional lives because you've given us life. We celebrate you today and we thank you today in your good and perfect name. Amen. So on Monday, I went into my office, and I have an office where I have windows that overlook the valley. And I looked out the windows and I saw this light green haze as I looked out the windows. And I'm like, is it toxic like waste just fuming up? Is that what it is? It's not that. Is it like some kind of cannabis plume coming from Capitol Hill? It's not that. What could it be? And I looked more closely, and then I realized it's spring. It's spring, right? And all those trees, all the little buds, all the little leaves, all the little petals, everything was starting to come out. And I'm like, yes, finally, there is life after death, all right? Because winter here, and I know some winters are bad, but I don't know about how many people just went, I'm really done with this winter. Like, this was more brutal than most. The ones that aren't, they have other issues. We're going to pray for you right now. But man, it was a brutal winter. And I remember just kind of waiting for the days. Because like at first, like the first part of winter's cool, right? Because the Seahawks are still playing. Christmas is coming, everything else. But then kind of like post-Christmas and we drop out of the playoffs, winter's just death, right? Winter's just there to tolerate until spring comes. And so when I start to see those first little hints, literally on the day I see it, I feel a shift in me. Like I'm just, finally, we're going to get there, and there's going to be life after all of this wintry death. And perhaps even seeing that this week all the more made me excited about what today then represents, because we are reflecting on the ultimate triumph of life after death. I mean, if you just stop for a minute and put yourself into that placement in the Palestinian world 2,000 years ago, you think about there was this morning, and literally it was a spring morning. Maybe a few nights before, Jesus is in a garden called Gethsemane, and he's praying. And as he's praying in that garden, the little shoots of life are starting to come out on the trees because it's moving from the death of winter to the life of spring. And then when Jesus rises from the tomb 3 days later, it's in a garden tomb, and again, where there's been death, life literally in the environment is springing forth from the soil. And so everything about it reminds us of this reality that, man, after death comes life. But if we put ourselves in that weekend 2,000 years ago, man, what a painful weekend, right? You started off on Thursday night, everything's looking good. Right? Everybody welcomed you into town. You're all just excited. And Jesus knows what's going down, but his friends, his buddies with him, they don't know what's going on. So they're just riding high through the week. But then Thursday night comes and everything falls apart. And then Friday comes, and we as Christians call Friday Good Friday, but it was a tragic Friday, a vile Friday, a hateful Friday, a cruel Friday. It was a deadly Friday. And then you had Saturday. Think about how bewildered everybody was on Saturday, the followers of Jesus going, man, we had this awesome come into town moment on Monday, but now it's Saturday and we're hidden away in fear. We're freaking out. We don't know what's going to happen next because the one that we follow is now dead. And with that, all of our visions for what life was to be, they died with him. Our lives died on Friday. And that's their Saturday. But then as the sun creeps over the horizon on Sunday, with that light, there is life anew. Little did anybody realize that this was going to be so profound that just a few days before, when it was so terrible, that suddenly there would be this rupture of an abundance, of a new way of doing things that was unlike anything they had ever dreamed of before. See, what's interesting about the resurrection of Jesus is that it taps many fronts. I think on a day like today, we think almost exclusively about the historical event of that activity on that early morning where he rises, and we go, man, that's the resurrection. What we forget is that the resurrection has ripples, it has layers, it has this concussive effect where it doesn't just simply bring Jesus to life, but it makes all things new, right? So his life renews our lives. I mean, that's fundamentally what we begin to see. And so even this morning as I thought about it, I want to try to capture all of that life renewal, that idea that the resurrection does many things. And we remember those many things this morning. Now, the place we have to start, though, is in the fact that on that day that Jesus died, death conquered death. Right? Death conquered death. On that Good Friday, Jesus suffered. He was betrayed. He was abandoned. There was people that were very excited about his arrest. They were very demanding of his execution. And so he was tortured. He was mishandled. He was falsely accused. And eventually he ended his life by the hands of those who hated him. And that is, in that of itself, a grievous scene. And sometimes when we look at the crucifixion, we look at it through our own human eyes. We think about it theatrically, and we think about the impact on us. Sometimes what we fail to do is actually think about the crucifixion from God's perspective. We look with our vision. But when we look in the Bible, we actually see that there is a vantage point that God has in the crucifixion that is valuable to us for this morning. It's actually found in Isaiah, which is an Old Testament book, but it reveals something about what Jesus was going to do. And it's in the book of Isaiah, chapter 53. This is from God's perspective what the cross was all about. It says, yes, in verse 10, it was the will of the Lord to crush him, and he has put him to grief. So from our perspective, we see all the terrible things that are happening to Jesus. And from God's perspective, what God is doing is he's crushing the Son. He's putting him to grief. God is putting him to grief. And we look at that and we go, that's weird. But then we see verse 11, out of the anguish of his soul, he shall see and be satisfied. By his knowledge, he shall see the righteous one who is his servant Jesus. He will make many to be accounted righteous, and he shall bear their iniquities. Now, I know that can be a little bit complicated. Like we read that and go, I don't know what to make of that. Let me see if I can translate it for you and simplify it. What you fundamentally have with the cross is God punishing God. What you have in the cross is a decision that God in himself makes that says, I will both be judge and judged. I will take upon myself the punishment that I myself afflict for rebellion. And so he becomes this generator of a cyclical model in which he both pours out and receives punishment. Now, what's interesting about this is that Jesus says at one point in the Gospels, no greater love does a person have than this, that you would lay down your life for a friend. And that's a very famous quote. It's used often outside of kind of biblical ideas. But what's interesting about what Jesus did, what the Father did, what their relationship did, how they were willing to be judged and judged, is this idea that says Jesus was willing to lay his life down, not merely for friends, but also for enemies. Right? He was willing to lay his life down for people that were against him, the people that mocked him, people that abused him, people that didn't want him. Still to this day, there are people that aren't interested. And he says, yeah, I lay my life down for those who are not interested, who oppose me. That's what I do. I come to give myself unto death. Why? So that I can give life. So that I can grant life to those who need life. That's what he offers. And when he did that, when he went to the cross, it wasn't just illustration, it wasn't just ideology, it wasn't something like that. It was deeper. It was truly designed to produce life in the people that are touched by that event. In fact, in John chapter 10, verse 10, it says this. He says, the thief comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy, but I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. This is Jesus' mission statement right here. I want you to pay attention to that. He says, here's why I came. I came not to make your life worse. I didn't come to suppress your desires. I didn't come to control your existence. I came to give you something that you desperately need and so badly want. I came to give you life in a robust way that nothing else in life could ever give you. That's what I came to do. I came to give life in a way that is truly abundant. When I was growing up, I had friends that had a simple motto, which was work hard, play harder. Right? Work hard, play harder. And I follow some of those friends on Facebook, and I look and I go, man, you've played really hard. You look like you've played hard. Your life looks worn out, it looks fatigued. And what I see in some of that work hard, play harder is they keep trying to play hard to find satisfaction, to find fulfillment, to find a sense of meaning for life. And then they keep not finding it, so they have to wait to the next event to bring that satisfaction that they seek. So they keep playing harder and playing harder. In between the events of playing harder, they're mildly inebriated. On the play hard days, they're totally hammered. And they can't find life. Not in a way that they feel truly alive. And it comes back to this thing of, because Jesus is the one that said, I came to give life abundant. Everything else is chasing. But what he gives is life abundant, right? He offers peace and satisfaction and fullness and joy. Not just getting by, but thriving. Not just surviving it, but boy, truly enjoying it. No wonder my friend Paul said something very interesting in the book of Philippians chapter 3. After going through the list of his power, his career, his pedigree, his resume, his ability to kind of utilize and manipulate others, and everything that he had in life, because I realized that all of my life was just meaningless. All that I achieved was worthless, and so now all I want to know him. And he said something interesting here. He said, I want to know him and the power of his resurrection. And he's not talking about, I want to someday be resurrected. That's not what he's talking about. He's saying, in my life today, I want to know the same power that rose Jesus from the dead. In other words, there's a life-giving thing embedded in the power of the resurrection. And Paul's like, I'm not satisfied in life just getting by. I want to experience something that is unique, something that feels untangible, and something that truly lifts my existence differently in the power of God. So he says, man, all I know is every day in life, I want to know him more, and this same power, this resurrection power that fuels abundant living. And see, this is why I say the resurrection has ripples. The resurrection isn't just merely about what Jesus did 2,000 years ago, and it's not merely about what will happen to us one day, but there's something between those bookends that the resurrection fuels as well. It fuels life. It fuels abundance. I might even go a step further and say, I think in part what the resurrection does when it brings life after death is it also brings life to our failures and to our burdens, to our hurts, to our disbeliefs, brings new life to our mistakes, new life to our vices in such a way that we can overcome those things, that we can move past those things. I find this illustrated profoundly in the Gospel of John. In John chapter 21, simple story. It's one that you're probably familiar with, but let me give you the backdrop really quick. So Jesus had a follower named Peter. Peter was loud, he was loyal, and he was a bit of a lug nut, right? Like The guy would go after it hardcore, and he was going to be with Jesus to the end. But then on the night that Jesus is arrested, at first, man, Peter goes crazy, pulls a sword, goes thug, right? Tries to cause some infight there with the people trying to arrest Jesus. And Jesus says, put it away, man, put it away. Because if you live by it, you die by it. That's not the way we're going to go down. And suddenly in that moment, Peter suddenly went, whoa, wait, everything that I thought my life was going to be is not what it's going to be. And he went from loud and loyal to fleeing, to denying, to cowering. And there by a fire 3 times he denies. I don't know him, I don't know him, I swear I don't know him. I mean, just complete denial, right? And then Jesus is executed, and 3 days later, by God's power, Jesus rises from the dead. Now, put yourself in Peter's sandals, right? Put yourself in Peter's sandals where 3 days ago, you denied him, and now you found out the dude you denied just rose. You a little nervous? Should be. I would be. Right? I mean, I'm sure it's both thrilling and vexing at the same time. It's like, Jesus is back. Wait, Jesus is back. And I didn't stand up for him. I didn't defend him. I didn't stand with him. I didn't do any of that. He's alive, but I kind of died inside because of what I did. I mean, just a complete stabbing in the back of a friend that is so close to you. I mean, that's the backdrop. So he's alive, but I just want to die. And yet Jesus rose not just for the afterlife, but for abundant life. And he's going to work in Peter's life right now to show that abundant life that is offered, right? And so in John chapter 21, we see another scene by a fire. Remember how Peter denied 3 times by a fire? Well, now Peter finds himself by a fire again. And after they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, he said, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And so Peter said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. So he said to him, I want you to feed my lambs. Then he said a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, then tend my sheep. It says, then he said to him a third time, 3 denials, now 3 questions. He said a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Now we can look at this and go, why all of this role play here? Right? But Jesus is trying to embed something in Peter. He's trying to move Peter past his failure. Right? Again, Peter probably just wants to die, and Jesus is saying, no, I rose so that you can have life abundant. Peter, I'm going to move you forward in your life. I'm going to move you past your failures. I want to move you past your denial. I want to move you past your mistakes. I'm not here to point it out. I'm not here to point out your failure. I'm not here to point out your fears. I'm here to take your life and improve it for my glory. So I'm going to drive you forward by reminding you of what you know. Do you love me? Now, in the third asking, Peter was grieved because he said to him a third time, do you love me? Peter is grieved because he knows what Jesus is getting at. He's converting shame to just grief now. It's lightning and heavy all at the same time, and that kind of thing. And so Peter just knows, I know what this is about. It's about my failure, and yet what Jesus is offering me is not, now here's how you make it right in some kind of, you have to be punished, but rather he's encouraging me, saying, if you love me, go walk forward in a newness of life. Go invest into what I most love. And so Peter is grieved when he asks. And so he says, Lord, you know everything. And you know that I love you. I'm weak, I'm foolish, I'm dumb, I'm denying, but I do love you. And Jesus says, well, then go invest into what I most care about. You want to experience life anew? You want to be freed from your failure? Then move forward in the newness of life, investing into the things that I most care about. And so what Jesus is doing is piercing Peter's sin with life-forgiving grace. Right? He's piercing Peter's sin with life-forgiving grace. He's disrupting Peter's failure with a life-giving opportunity, right? So he's displacing the shame. and saying, hey, I want to give you instead this affirming purpose that brings life to others. And so all of it is, again, about there is death that then converts to life, because the resurrection is about converting death to life, even in our own individual lives. And this is what Jesus does in our lives too, right? He brings life to our anemic and sickly decisions and events and histories and decisions that we make, that we go, man, we know that that is so contrary. And he doesn't sit there and pound how contrary some of our things are. Rather, he says, you know what? Do me a favor. If you love me, man, go and invest into what I have invested into. Go and love what I love. Go and find life fully alive by pursuing the things that I have created to have true, robust life. And so this is totally freeing for Peter, a guy that we might look at and say, you know what, man, here's how you got to pay the penalty for what you did. You got to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We got to go with this, and you got to grovel. Jesus doesn't want him to grovel. Jesus says, you know what, hey, man, I want you to get past your fear, your failure, and your faults, and I want you to have life. If you love me, man, go find life. So this is why I say today is more than a memorial. It's more than dogma or being sentimental. It's more than history. It is anchoring us again in the fact that that moment of the resurrection is a catalyst to abundant living today, every single day. And so it ripples. In fact, when you read through some of the verses in the New Testament about the resurrection, it shows you that it invades all kinds of space in our lives. In fact, in Colossians chapter 2, it gives this bold proclamation to those who believe in Jesus. He says, you were also raised with him through faith and the powerful working of God who raised him from the dead. And you who were dead in your trespasses, God made alive together with him, having forgiven us all of our trespasses. So one of the things of the resurrection isn't merely that Jesus rose from the dead, but in raising from the dead, he says, I give you abundance of life, and in abundance of life, I give you the power of the resurrection in your life, and part of that is to forgive you. It forgives. Notice it even says there, we've been raised with him. There's something about the resurrection of Christ that raises our lives up as well. And so from me, he goes, man, you are radically forgiven. There's no sin too big that I don't forgive. There's no mistake so profound that it can't be dealt with. That is the power of life-giving resurrection. In 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, it says, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to what? A living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. So forgiveness and hope. I look at a world and I see an absence of hope. People turn on the news, there's not a lot of hope. People go to social media, there's not a lot of hope. People look at their bank account, not a lot of hope, right? Whatever it is, like all kinds of things, we go, there's not a lot of hope, but yet he says here, man, you've been raised to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. The resurrection gives us hope. In Romans chapter 6, verse 4, it says, Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father. We too then might work and walk and live in the newness of life. So it's not just forgiveness, not just hope, but also a new life. Every day a new life because of what he's provided. And this isn't merely about ethics. It's about goals and transformation and a sense of drive in the heart that longs for more of the life that God offers. This is what the resurrection does. I love it. It says in Colossians chapter 3, it says, if you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above and not on the things of this earth. For you've died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is your life, appears, you will also appear with him in glory. What I love about this is it tells us then how to pursue this abundant life that Jesus offers. Set your mind above. I know for me, just personally, really quick, I have a tendency at times to set my mind on the horizon of this life. And when I do that, I start to look and say, all right, world, make me happy. All right, world, make me fulfilled. All right, world, give me purpose. And yet repeatedly, it demands more than it gives, right? So I keep wanting more of this life to fill me up, and more, I need more of this life to fill me up, and it doesn't work. It always depletes faster than I can take it in. And so what Jesus is saying is, man, that's the problem with you, Matt. You look at the horizon of this world too much, and you don't look at me enough. Because when you look to me, Christ is your life. And we've been raised with him, and when we look to him, man, there is an abundance of life. There is peace, there is joy, there is purpose, there's contentment, there is a sense of satisfaction. Even when things are off the rails, there's something deeper that is offered. And what I love about the good news of Jesus is that it's offered to all of us. It's an invitation to make us fully alive. In fact, what Jesus is saying is, you know what, man, if you really want to see life kicked up a notch into something that you've never anticipated before, then follow me. Follow me and there's abundance of life. Follow me and I will change the trajectory of things. That's the invitation. That's the invitation to us today. In fact, there's this great little verse that says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Pretty simple invitation, right? What we celebrate today, like I said, is more than just some memento of a token theological idea. This is a profound event that changes the course of a person's life. And Jesus says, man, I invite you to that. Now, there's probably three categories of people in the room. Some of us go, man, I seek to follow Jesus in a faithful way. I'm an imperfect person, but I know he's a perfect God who has rescued my life. And that's one category. Another category, maybe some of us in this room that say, you know what, I used to follow Jesus, but I've gotten away from things for a while. And this is an important invitation. And then some of us may be in the room this morning and we go, I've never followed Jesus, but there's something in me that's drawn now. I know I have run the course of life and it doesn't feel like my life is becoming more alive, but more tired, more worn, more stretched thin, more incomplete. And that baseline continues to trend down. Like I don't see it getting necessarily more fulfilling as time goes on. Maybe that's you. So there's a whole spectrum. But the invitation's to all, right? If we believe in our heart that God raised him from the dead, we will be saved. We confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord. And so right now, I want to encourage everybody to take a moment to try to, I know we're in a room with a bunch of people, but to isolate ourselves for just a moment to ourselves with God by just closing our eyes and bowing our heads. It's a good way to kind of isolate ourselves in a room to be reflective. And I want us to be reflective, each of us, on what we do with this thing called the resurrection of Jesus. What do we do with it? For some, you may say it's mythology, and I'm going to put it in the camp of mythology. And I understand there's been times in my life where I've said it's mythology. I do understand that. Others of you will say, I think it's a fact, but I haven't done much with the fact. I would encourage you to take the next step in that and say, if you believe it's a fact, then say, Jesus, I want you to have control of my life. I want you to be truly the one who drives my destiny and drives my daily decisions and takes control over the things in me. I acknowledge my choosing my own path, going my own way, doing my own thing, writing my own rules, being my own master. But now I turn that to you. Turn it all over to you. Like you make that your prayer in your way and you say, I confess with my mouth that Jesus is Lord. I believe in my heart that God raised him from the dead. And Jesus says, you're my kid. I save you. I change you. I move in your life to bring abundant life. Now maybe for some of us, we say, you know what, I believe, but I haven't been focused lately. This is a great day for you to say, you know what, Jesus, I want to get focused again. You know, I keep looking at the horizon of life and it doesn't pay off, and I'm almost tired of just getting by. I want something deeper and more robust. And come back and say, Jesus, man, grab a hold of my life and may I have a kind of a robust life in you. And then those of us who seek to follow faithfully every day, that we may continue just to do that, continue to be faithful, believing even on the hard days, you know what? Jesus is working and he is taking off the edge even in the hard days, and he's growing something great that is truly abundant life. Jesus, in all of these things, in all these categories, I just come before you now. And I thank you that you invade our space, you invade our life to bring us abundant life. I thank you for this reality that in the kind of the natural world, ultimately life is about decay, right? We only grow for a very short season in comparison to the downslope of a very long season of preparing to die. You, on the other hand, step in, you invade death, and then you put us on an arc of abundant life that moves into afterlife, which is more abundant life. And so I pray today that we will remember that the resurrection is about abundant life and afterlife. It is about both, and it moves us from estrangement to union. Moves us from brokenness to healing, moves us from maybe aimlessness to target. And you are that goal and target. Your goodness and glory and grace, all of that becomes the target. I pray that we are always mesmerized and moved by the offering of the life that you give us through your sacrifice and through your resurrection. We love you and thank you in your name. Amen.